Hi YouTube, for today's video I'm going to show you how to enable SNMP on Unifi Controller so that you're able to monitor your network devices using an external monitoring solution. The requirement for this video is to have Unifi itself, Unifi Network Controller, bunch of network devices that I do have here, and then I'm going to use PRTG monitoring for the purpose of this demonstration, and then we're going to download a big file, a Windows image, and see whether we can detect bandwidth utilization, CPU utilization, basic stuff. Unifi Controller itself provides you a little bit of information regarding the CPU utilization, memory, bandwidth utilization. For instance, you can see that I'm using 8% of my internet capacity at the moment. This is the CPU utilization on the security gateway, aka firewall. But before we start, I just want to tell you that enabling SNMP on Unifi Controller is an intrusive process, meaning that the moment you enable it, you're going to lose connectivity to your wireless. So the devices kind of lose their mind, and by the time they come back to their senses, you need about 1 or 2 minutes of outage. So if you're doing this on a production environment, be careful with this. My topology is slightly different, slightly goofed up, meaning that my Unifi controller is behind this switch, daisy chained to this wireless access point, again uplink to another access point because I don't want to host my ESXi next to my pillow. So this is a desperate measure to have connectivity, end-to-end connectivity for my home network. So I need roughly about 4 to 5 minutes for this whole topology to recover from enabling SNMP. Just take note of that. So without further ado, let's get started. Now, the way to enable SNMP would be to go to settings. By the way, this is the old dashboard. If you're on the new dashboard, please revert to the old interface and then enable SNMP. So I'm not going to cover the new dashboard. So we're going to go to settings, then services, then SNMP. And in here, I have the option to enable SNMP version 1/version 2 or SNMP version 3. I'm just going to enable SNMP version 3. Note that some of the devices in my topology doesn't support the feature. If I expand it, it says that this particular switch doesn't support it. And I have one of these switches in my topology. So that's the disclaimer. Also, this is the authentication, aka hash, and this is the encryption, AES. So take note of these two values. Gonna apply the changes, but take note of this. Now I'm pinging my wireless controller, which is located in another building. And by the time I apply the changes, I'm gonna lose connectivity. So I'm gonna click on apply. Says I need to have 8 characters here. Let's just do that. I'm gonna lose connection. Take note of this wireless signal in here. Here we go. So I'm going to resume the recording once the topology is converged again, and then together we will configure the PRTG for the monitoring. Alright, as you can see, I can ping the controller again. The topology is now converged. So let's go to the monitoring dashboard. But before we do that, let's take a look at our network devices. One of the devices is still not in the mix. Let's give it some time to recover from that. I'm going to go to the monitoring dashboard. We are not going to put the IP address of the controller. I'm going to add a device, and in here, let me actually refresh that. The PRTG is also hosted in the same ESXi, so I'm gonna try and refresh this. Click on add device. I'm not gonna put this IP address into the PRTG. Instead, I'm gonna go for the devices. So I'm gonna go with my security gateway, this IP address, 64.132.64. This is my security gateway, and this is the IP address. I'm going to click on OK. If I click on Add Sensor and click on SNMP, and for instance SNMP traffic, it's not going to go anywhere because the credentials aren't added to PRTG. So we need to add the credentials first. And the best place to put these credentials would be to go to the network, unless you want to do it multiple times. Go to the network, go to settings, I'm going to find SNMP. Gonna change this to SNMP version 3, and then I'm gonna put in the username, just like this one. The password, authentication password is this, and the encryption key is the same. I know in Cisco it's slightly different, but at least in case of Ubiquiti, you need to put in the same password. Leave the port to be the same, timeout 5 seconds, looks okay to me. I'm gonna click on save. Now I'm gonna click on add the sensor, SNMP. I wanna monitor bandwidth utilization, for instance. Let's click on this one. And this is a sign of success. So I'm gonna click on, for instance, WAN interface. I wanna monitor how much internet bandwidth I'm utilizing. So I'm gonna click on create. And just like that, my sensor is created. I'm gonna add another sensor, for instance, SNMP. CPU utilization, for instance, CPU load. Gonna click on create. Created my second sensor. Now imagine that, for instance, out of all these devices, the switch is important to me, or let's say this access point, which is acting as a single point of failure in my topology. So I want to know if this access point fails or not. This goofed up topology has its problems, and I'll throw monitoring at it to kind of know that what has happened, even though with my topology it doesn't make any sense, because the moment I lose that access point, I lose PRTG. So this is for the sole purpose of demonstration and nothing else. I'm gonna add another device, and I'm gonna put in AP1, for instance. What is the IP address of AP1? Gonna say 42. 64.132.42. Then I'm gonna click on OK. Gonna add my sensor, SNMP. Again, I want to see how much traffic is passing through that particular device, since this is an aggregation point in my network. Gonna add ETH01, create. I can also add ICMP, but ICMP doesn't need SNMP credentials, so that's fine. I can, for instance, add the CPU load on that access point in case I run into problems. And let's take a look at the statistics now. For instance, the bandwidth utilization on the internet link. As you can see, I'm not using so much bandwidth at the moment. I can start downloading an image from the internet. This should at least prove that the PRTG is monitoring the correct interface. Let's give it some time. As you can see, my internet utilization is now 87%. Okay, I refreshed it and now it's 100. CPU utilization is 15% here. And if I refresh PRTG, I should be able to see a spike. It's downloading at 80 megabit per second. I can go to the CPU load, and processor number 2 is reflecting the correct CPU utilization. I'm not too sure about processor number 1, but this is almost accurate. And that concludes our video for today. I hope this video has been useful to you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to comment in the comment section below. And as always, don't forget to subscribe. Peace out.